I
The
understand
road was
concern,
loud with
officers.
passing
Everything is
traffic,
under control.
but the moment
There's
itself
no need
felt
for alarm.
strangely quiet. Cars rushed by in long blurs of motion, tires humming against asphalt, wind pushing dust across the shoulder of the highway. A few drivers slowed down, curious about the small scene unfolding near a stopped vehicle. It wasn't dramatic at first. No crash, no flashing emergency lights. Just a man standing beside his car, hands relaxed at his sides, waiting. He didn't look important. Simple clothes, no expensive watch, no bodyguards, no signs of urgency or panic. Just an older man with a calm posture, standing patiently as if time meant nothing to him. To anyone passing by, he looked like someone you'd forget 5 seconds later. That's why the voice cut through the noise so sharply. "Do you even know where you are right now?" The words were loud, sharp, designed to embarrass. Heads turned. A couple standing near their own car glanced over. A driver rolled down his window slightly. What had been an ordinary roadside stop instantly became a public moment. The man didn't respond.
I understand the concern,
The
officers.
uniformed
Everything is
figure
under
stepped
control.
closer,
There's no
clearly
need for alarm.
irritated by the silence. There was a smirk now, one of those smiles that comes from believing you have all the power in the situation. "I asked you a question," he said, louder this time. "You can't just stop wherever you want and act like this road belongs to you." Still, the man said nothing. He didn't argue. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He simply stood there, eyes steady, expression unreadable. That seemed to annoy the uniformed figure even more. "Let me guess," he added sarcastically, glancing at the car, then back at the man. "You're in a hurry, right? Always the same story. People like you think the rules don't apply to them." A few bystanders exchanged looks. Some felt uncomfortable. Others leaned in, sensing something was about to happen. The situation felt stretched, like a moment that should have ended already but didn't. The man finally shifted his weight slightly, not in fear, not in submission, just enough to show he was listening. But still no words.
I understand
That
the
silence
concern,
spoke
officers.
louder than
Everything is
anything he
under
could have
control.
said.
There's no need for
The
alarm.
uniformed figure laughed under his breath, shaking his head as if he'd already decided who this man was. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "Standing there like you're somebody." The air changed. Not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. There was something unsettling about how calm the man remained. No tension in his shoulders, no nervous glances, no defensive gestures, just quiet presence. Controlled, grounded. One of the bystanders felt it and whispered, "Why isn't he reacting?" Another thought it but didn't say it out loud. "This doesn't look like fear." The uniformed figure mistook that calm for weakness. And that mistake, made on the side of a busy road, in front of strangers, was about to turn this ordinary stop into a moment none of them would forget. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is underestimate the wrong person. The road itself felt ordinary, almost forgettable. It was one of those long stretches of highway where nothing interesting ever seemed to
I
happen.
understand the concern,
Concrete
officers.
lanes
Everything is
stretched
under
endlessly
control.
in both
There's no need
directions,
for alarm.
bordered by faded guardrails and dusty patches of dry grass. The kind of place where people passed through without looking, focused only on getting where they were going. But on that day, the atmosphere carried a strange weight. Traffic moved steadily, but slower than usual. Drivers craned their necks as they passed, curious about the stopped car and the small cluster of people nearby. A few vehicles pulled over farther down the shoulder, their occupants pretending to check their phones, while quietly observing what was unfolding. This roadside wasn't just a random place. It was a place where authority usually went unquestioned. Out here, uniforms mattered. Tone mattered. The rules were enforced quickly and without much explanation. Most people didn't argue. They complied, nodded, apologized, and hoped to leave as soon as possible. On roads like this, the balance of power was clear, and everyone knew which side they were on. The man standing by his car didn't fit that rhythm. He
I
didn't rush.
understand the
He
concern,
didn't fidget.
officers.
He
Everything
didn't
is
look
under
worried
control.
about how long this
There's
was
no need for
taking.
alarm.
His vehicle wasn't flashy, clean but unremarkable. No luxury plates, no decals. Nothing that suggested influence or status. If anything, it blended perfectly into the scenery. Exactly the kind of car you'd expect to see broken down on the side of a highway. And that's what made the contrast so sharp. Because while everything about the setting screamed control, hierarchy, and authority, everything about the man suggested patience. Most people, when stopped like this, tried to explain themselves immediately. They talked too much. They apologized too quickly. They searched their pockets, their faces tense with the fear of doing something wrong. He did none of that. He stood with the kind of stillness that made time feel slower. His shoulders were relaxed, his breathing steady. He looked like someone who wasn't concerned about how this situation would end. That alone felt out of place. The roadside had its own unspoken culture. You followed instructions. You didn't ask
I
questions.
understand the concern,
You didn't
officers.
challenge
Everything is under
tone.
control.
The uniform
no need for
dictated the
alarm.
outcome, and anyone who forgot that usually learned very quickly. The bystanders felt it too. A man leaning against his truck crossed his arms, watching with narrowed eyes. A woman standing near her car shifted uncomfortably, sensing tension even though nothing dramatic had happened yet. A younger driver whispered to his friend, "Why hasn't this ended already?" Everyone expected the same thing, a quick warning, a fine, an apology, then everyone moves on. But this wasn't moving on. The silence lingered longer than it should have. The pause between words stretched awkwardly, like a scene stuck in slow motion. It felt as though the road itself was waiting, and the man remained exactly where he was. Not defiant, not submissive, just present. That presence quietly disrupted the usual order of things. The authority that normally filled the roadside now felt unsettled, as if it had encountered something it didn't quite understand. Some of the onlookers began to feel secondhand
I understand the
discomfort,
concern, officers.
not because
Everything
they
is under
feared
control.
what would happen to the
There's no
man,
need for alarm.
but because the situation didn't follow the pattern they were used to. Power was supposed to look loud, commanding, obvious. This power looked quiet, and quiet power makes people nervous. A few whispers floated through the air. Who is he? Why isn't he saying anything? This is getting weird. The road kept moving. Cars passed. Engines hummed. Life continued as if nothing important was happening. Yet everyone watching could feel it. This moment mattered, even if they didn't know why. Because sometimes, the most revealing situations aren't loud or violent. They're the ones where someone with nothing to prove refuses to play the role expected of them. And right there, on an ordinary roadside, the rules were already starting to bend. Before we continue, what do you think was going through his mind at that moment? The uniformed figure had already decided who this man was. That decision showed in his posture, in the way he stood slightly taller, chest forward, chin raised.
I
It
understand
showed in the
concern,
careless
officers.
confidence of
Everything is
someone
under
who
control.
believed the
There's no
situation
need
was
for
already
alarm.
under control. To him, this wasn't a conversation. It was a demonstration. He circled the man slowly, boots crunching against gravel, eyes scanning from head to toe. The calm face. The lack of urgency. Each detail confirmed his assumption. "Let me get this straight," he said loudly, making sure everyone nearby could hear. "You pull over here like this, you don't say a word, and you expect me to believe you've got a good reason." His tone wasn't curious. It was mocking. The man remained still. That only fueled the irritation. The uniformed figure let out a short laugh and shook his head. "You know what your problem is," he continued. "You think staying quiet makes you look smart. It doesn't. It makes you look like you don't understand how things work." A couple of bystanders glanced at each other. This was no longer about rules or procedure. This had become personal. The uniformed figure pointed briefly at the car. "That thing looks like it barely
I
belongs on the
understand the
road,
concern, officers.
and you're
Everything is
standing
under
here like
control.
you own the
There's
place."
no need for alarm.
He smirked, clearly enjoying himself. "You people are always the same," he added. "No awareness, no respect. Then you act surprised when you get called out." The words hung heavy in the air. The insult was clear, the judgment was public, and the intention was unmistakable. The man said nothing. That silence seemed to irritate the uniformed figure even more than any argument would have. He stepped closer now, invading personal space, lowering his voice just enough to sound threatening while still being heard. "You hear me, right?" he said. "I'm talking to you." Still nothing. The uniformed figure scoffed. "Unbelievable," he muttered. Then louder, "You think ignoring me makes you important?" He glanced toward the small group of onlookers, as if seeking their agreement. Some looked away. Others watched in quiet discomfort. No one intervened. Encouraged, the uniformed figure pushed further. "Let me guess," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're going to tell me some story
I
about how
understand
this
the
isn't your
concern,
fault.
officers. Everything is under
Or
control.
maybe you'll pretend you
There's no
don't
need for
understand the
alarm.
rules. That's usually how this goes." He paused, waiting. Nothing. The pause felt awkward now. Heavy. The uniformed figure clenched his jaw. His patience was thinning, not because the situation was out of control, but because it wasn't unfolding the way he expected. He wanted resistance. He wanted excuses. He wanted submission. Instead, he got silence. And silence in his mind was disrespect. "You know what?" he snapped. "I don't have time for this." He turned slightly, gesturing with his hand as if dismissing the man entirely. "People like you think the world owes them something. You don't belong standing here acting like this road revolves around you." That line drew a visible reaction from the crowd. A woman near her car shifted her weight uncomfortably. A man farther back frowned, clearly bothered by the tone. The humiliation was no longer subtle, it was deliberate. The uniformed figure straightened up again, louder now, fully confident in his authority.
I
Next
understand
time,
the concern,
learn some
officers.
manners.
Everything is
You're
under
not
control.
special.
There's
You're
no
just
need for
another
alarm.
guy who didn't plan his day properly. The words landed like a slap. Still, the man didn't flinch. No defensive posture, no raised hands, no change in expression. That calmness in the face of open disrespect was unsettling. The uniformed figure mistook it for fear. "Yeah," he said with a short laugh. "That's what I thought." He took a step back, satisfied with himself, convinced he had made his point. To him this was over. He had asserted dominance. He had reminded everyone watching who held power here. What he didn't realize was that every insult, every sarcastic remark, every public jab had only sharpened the tension. The bystanders could feel it. This wasn't the reaction of a man who was beaten down. This wasn't the silence of someone embarrassed. It was the silence of someone choosing restraint. And that difference, subtle, invisible to the uniformed figure, was about to matter more than anything else that had been said. The man's calm did not waver. While
I
the
understand the
uniformed
concern,
figure spoke,
officers. Everything is
mocked,
under
and
control.
pushed his authority
There's no need
forward,
for alarm.
the man remained exactly where he was, feet planted, shoulders relaxed, eyes steady. There was no tension in his jaw, no tightening of fists, no restless movement that suggested fear or frustration. It was as if the noise around him barely existed. He listened, not with submission, but with awareness. Every word landed, yet none of them provoked a reaction. The insults passed over him like wind over still water, noticed, but not absorbed. That unsettled something in the air. Most people, when placed in a situation like this, instinctively reacted. They defended themselves. They tried to explain. They grew visibly nervous or visibly angry. Their bodies betrayed them long before their words did. This man did neither. He didn't look away, but he didn't stare aggressively either. His gaze stayed calm, level, unchallenging. The kind of look that didn't seek approval and didn't fear consequence. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't defiance. It was control. The uniformed figure mistook that stillness for weakness.
I understand the concern,
But the
officers.
bystanders
Everything is under
began to sense
control.
otherwise.
There's no need for alarm.
Something about the man's posture felt deliberate, like someone who knew exactly how much energy to give a moment, and how much to withhold. Time stretched. Traffic continued to pass, but the scene itself felt frozen. Seconds lingered longer than they should have. Even the uniformed figure seemed unsure why he kept talking, why he hadn't already moved on. The man shifted slightly, adjusting his stance, not to step away, not to step forward, just enough to stay comfortable. It was a subtle movement, but it carried weight. It said, "I'm not going anywhere." Still no words. The uniformed figure cleared his throat, irritated. He had expected the silence to break by now. An apology, an explanation, something. Instead, he was met with the same composed presence, unchanged. "You're really committed to this act, huh?" he said, trying again to provoke a response. The man's expression remained neutral. Inside that silence, something dangerous was forming. Not violence, not anger, but certainty.
I
The
understand
kind
the
that
concern,
doesn't rush.
officers. Everything
The
is under
kind that
control.
waits.
There's no need
One of
for
the
alarm.
bystanders felt it and crossed his arms unconsciously. Another leaned closer, sensing that this moment wasn't finished yet. There was a strange respect growing among the witnesses, not because the man had said anything impressive, but because he hadn't said anything at all. Silence, when chosen, can be louder than shouting. The uniformed figure laughed again, though it sounded forced this time. "You know," he said, "most people would have said something by now." The man finally moved his eyes just slightly, meeting the uniformed figure's gaze fully for the first time. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't a threat. It was acknowledgement. That brief moment of eye contact changed the tone completely. The uniformed figure paused mid-breath, just for a fraction of a second, before quickly recovering. But it was enough. The pause didn't go unnoticed. The man said nothing, but somehow everything had shifted. The uniformed figure felt it and didn't like it. The balance he thought he controlled suddenly felt
I understand the
uncertain.
concern,
He
officers.
stood a little
Everything is
straighter,
under control.
his confidence
There's
now
no
mixed
need
with
for alarm.
irritation. "Fine," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "Stand there. See where that gets you." The man didn't react. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He didn't move. That calm wasn't passive. It was deliberate restraint. A decision to not escalate. A choice to let the moment reveal itself rather than force an outcome. To the onlookers, it began to feel less like a roadside stop and more like a test. Who would lose patience first? The uniformed figure shifted his weight, glancing briefly toward the road, then back at the man, He seemed unsure whether to push harder or end the encounter. The silence was working against him now. It stripped away the drama he relied on. It exposed his need for control. The man's stillness, by contrast, felt grounded, solid. Like someone who had faced worse situations than this and walked away unchanged. No shouting, no explanations, no ego. Just presence. And presence, when paired with restraint, can be unsettling to those who rely on dominance to feel powerful. The bystanders could feel the tension tightening, like a stretched wire. Something was coming. Not because the man had threatened anything, but because his calm had left no room for pretense. Whatever happened next would not be forced. It would be revealed. And the uniformed figure, still mistaking silence for weakness, had no idea how close he was to realizing the truth. The tension didn't explode all at once, it spread. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. What had started as a simple roadside stop had now drawn an audience without anyone realizing how it happened. Cars slowed as they passed. A few drivers pulled over farther down, pretending to make calls while keeping one eye on the scene. Even those who didn't stop felt it. Something unusual was happening. Something that didn't fit the normal rhythm of the road. The silence was doing the work. Whispers began to form at the edges of the crowd. Why is this taking so long? Did you hear what he said to him? That guy isn't reacting at all. A man standing near a pickup truck shook his head quietly.
There's no need
Most
for alarm.
people would have lost it by now, he muttered, not to anyone in particular. The uniformed figure noticed the attention and seemed to draw energy from it. He straightened again, glancing around as if reminding everyone who was in charge. But the confidence from earlier didn't land the same way anymore. The audience wasn't on his side, they were watching him. That made him uncomfortable. He shifted his stance and raised his voice slightly, not at the man, but for the crowd to hear. "All right, everyone, keep it moving," he said, though no one was blocking traffic. "This doesn't concern you." Yet people stayed. Because now, it felt like it did concern them. The man by the car hadn't moved. His posture remained relaxed, unchanged, as if the growing crowd meant nothing to him. He didn't look around to see who was watching. He didn't seek support or sympathy. He remained focused only on the moment in front of him. That steadiness stood in sharp contrast to the atmosphere around him. A second uniformed figure appeared in the distance, walking over slowly. Not hurried, not alarmed, just curious. The first uniformed figure noticed and waved him over with a quick gesture, as if calling for backup or validation. "What's going on here?" the newcomer asked quietly. The first uniformed figure responded with a shrug and a half smile. "Guy doesn't want to talk," he said, loud enough for others to hear. Just standing there like he's above it all. The second uniformed figure glanced at the man. He looked longer than expected. There was no recognition, at least, not outwardly. But something in his expression shifted. His tone softened slightly when he spoke. "Sir," he said, more neutral than aggressive. "Is everything all right?" The man met his eyes calmly. "Yes," he replied simply. It was the first word he'd spoken, and it changed everything. The crowd felt it. The word wasn't defensive. It wasn't apologetic. It wasn't rushed. It carried a quiet confidence that made the earlier insults feel suddenly out of place. The first uniformed figure scoffed.
"I understand
said,
the concern,
"He can
officers.
talk."
Everything is under control."
But the second uniformed
There's no need
figure
for
didn't
alarm.
smile. He glanced again at the man, his posture, his calm, the way he carried himself without effort. Something didn't add up. This didn't look like someone caught off guard. This didn't feel like a man trying to bluff his way through a situation. The crowd sensed it too. A woman whispered, "That's it?" "That's all he said?" A teenager leaning against a car nodded slowly. "Yeah, but did you hear how he said it?" The moment stretched again. The first uniformed figure grew impatient. "All right," he said sharply. "I've had enough of this." But now his voice didn't command the same authority. People were watching differently, not waiting for punishment, waiting for clarity. The second uniformed figure took a small step back, giving the man space rather than taking it. He said nothing more, but his body language spoke volumes. He was observing now, not enforcing. That subtle shift didn't go unnoticed. The first uniformed figure felt it slip. Control. Momentum. Certainty. He cleared his throat. "I'll get this sorted," he muttered, pulling out his radio. The man remained still. No reaction, no comment, no concern. The crowd leaned in without realizing it. Conversations faded. Engines idled. Even the road seemed quieter, as if holding its breath. Whatever was about to happen would change the tone of everything that came before. Because once witnesses stop seeing authority as unquestionable, they start looking for truth instead. And standing there, calm and unmoved, The man had unknowingly shifted the balance, not through force, not through words, but through restraint. The next moment would answer every unspoken question hanging in the air. And it would do so in a way no one on that roadside expected. Before we go on, what do you think made everyone suddenly start doubting who really had control here? The sound of the radio crackling broke the silence. The first uniformed figure turned slightly away from the man, speaking in a low voice, his back half turned as if the conversation itself might restore some sense of control.
I understand the concern,
His
officers.
tone was
Everything
clipped,
is under control.
professional on the
There's no
surface,
need for alarm.
but edged with irritation underneath. Yes, he said. I need confirmation. The crowd watched closely now. No one pretended to look away anymore. The second uniformed figure remained quiet, his eyes moving between the man and his colleague. He said nothing, but his posture told a different story than before. He was no longer braced for confrontation. He was waiting. Seconds passed, then more. The radio crackled again. The first uniformed figure's expression shifted almost imperceptibly at first. His eyebrows tightened. His jaw stiffened. He glanced down at the device, then back at the man, then away again, as if hoping the message might change if he listened twice. What? He said into the radio. His voice dropped. Are you sure? The man didn't move. The bystanders felt it before they understood it. That subtle change. That moment when certainty drains out of someone's posture. The uniformed figure swallowed and turned fully back toward the man now. His earlier confidence was gone, replaced by something quieter,
Everything is under control.
unsteady. He
There's
cleared
no need
his
for alarm.
throat. He said, and the word landed differently this time. Not sarcastic, not dismissive, respectful. The road felt suddenly very still. Yes, the man replied calmly. The uniformed figure hesitated. The pause stretched just long enough for the crowd to feel it tighten in their chests. Then he spoke again, slower now. Could you confirm your name for me? The man looked at him steadily. Steven Seagal, he said. The effect was immediate. The second uniformed figure's eyes widened slightly before he caught himself. His shoulders straightened not defensively but formally. The crowd murmured in a low wave, recognition rippling outward like electricity. The first uniformed figure froze. The name didn't just register. It landed. His face drained of color. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. He glanced around as if hoping no one else had heard it, but it was too late. A woman whispered, "Did he just say?" Another voice cut in, hushed and stunned. That's him. The first uniformed figure took an involuntary step back. I wasn't aware, he said quickly, the words tumbling out now unpolished. I didn't realize. Steven Seagal raised a hand gently, not to stop him out of anger, but to calm the moment. It's all right, he said evenly. That single sentence carried more authority than everything that had been shouted earlier. It wasn't forgiving. It wasn't dismissive. It was measured, controlled. The second uniformed figure stepped forward now, his tone completely changed. Sir, he said respectfully, we apologize for the misunderstanding. The first uniformed figure nodded stiffly, embarrassment tightening his features. Yes, of course. I apologize as well. The crowd watched in silence. This was the moment they'd been waiting for, not the humiliation, not the shouting, but the reversal, the shift, the instant where power rearranged itself without force. Steven didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He didn't remind anyone who he was. He simply nodded once. The first uniformed figure looked down briefly, then back up, clearly aware of every witness watching him now. The authority he had leaned on minutes earlier felt fragile in his hands. I should have handled this differently, he said quietly. Steven met his eyes. Everyone has moments they learn from, he replied. This can be one of yours. The words landed harder than any insult could have. The crowd felt it. A few people nodded unconsciously. Someone exhaled a breath they didn't realize they were holding. The second uniformed figure stepped back, giving Steven space. The road began to feel normal again, engines starting, doors closing, but the energy had changed permanently. Steven turned slightly toward his car, the situation clearly resolved. But before he stepped away, he paused. Not for the uniformed figures, for the people watching. He looked around briefly, his gaze calm, thoughtful. Then he spoke one last time, his voice steady and clear. Respect isn't about who you think someone is, he said. It's about how you treat them before you know. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. The uniformed figures stepped aside. The crowd slowly dispersed. Cars pulled back onto the road, engines fading into the distance. And just like that, the moment ended. Not with noise, not with drama, but with a quiet truth revealed on the side of an ordinary road, in front of ordinary people, who would carry that moment with them far longer than they expected. The road slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Engines started. Doors closed. Cars merged back into traffic one by one, the moment dissolving into the everyday flow of the highway. To anyone passing through minutes later, it would look like nothing had happened at all. Just another stretch of asphalt. Just another day. But for those who had witnessed it, something had changed. The uniformed figure stood quietly for a moment longer than necessary, watching Steven walk back toward his car. The arrogance that had filled his voice earlier was gone. In its place was something heavier: reflection, awareness, the uncomfortable realization that power, when misused, exposes weakness rather than strength. Steven didn't rush. He opened his car door calmly, the same way he'd stood through every insult. There was no urgency to leave, no need to escape the situation. He had nothing to prove and nothing to run from. Before getting in, he paused. Not dramatically, not for attention, just long enough to speak. "I hope you remember this," he said, not harshly, not kindly, just honestly. "Not because of who I am, but because of who anyone could be." The uniformed figure nodded, unable to meet his eyes at first. "I will," he replied quietly. That was it. No punishment demanded, no threats issued, no public shaming returned. Justice didn't come in the form of revenge that day. It came in the form of restraint. Steven drove away, his car blending back into traffic like it had always belonged there. And just as quickly as he left, the weight of the moment settled on everyone who remained. A man near the shoulder exhaled slowly. "That could have gone very differently," he said. Another replied, "Yeah, but he didn't make it about ego." That was the lesson.
I understand the
True
concern,
strength doesn't
officers.
announce
Everything is
itself.
under control.
It doesn't raise
There's
its
no need for
voice.
alarm.
It doesn't rush to dominate. It waits. It listens. And when it speaks, it does so with intention. The people who had watched the exchange didn't walk away feeling entertained. They walked away thoughtful, quiet, changed in small ways they wouldn't notice until later. Some would remember the calm. Some would remember the silence. Some would remember the way respect shifted the moment it was given, not demanded. And maybe, just maybe, the next time they found themselves in a position of authority or vulnerability, they'd choose differently. Because respect isn't reserved for names, titles, or appearances. It's owed to people, all people. Moments like this don't go viral because of shouting or spectacle. They linger because they reveal something uncomfortable and true, that judging others is easy, but controlling yourself is rare. And on that ordinary roadside, with nothing but patience and restraint, one man reminded everyone watching what real power looks like. If this story made
I
you
understand the
pause,
concern,
even for a
officers. Everything
second,
is under control.
then it did what it was
There's no
meant
need
to
for
do.
alarm.
More stories like this are coming, stories about quiet strength, unexpected moments, and lessons that stay with you long after the screen fades to black. If you enjoyed this one, share it with someone who believes respect still matters. Drop a comment and tell us which part of the story hit you the hardest. And if you're watching from somewhere in the world right now, let us know, where are you watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next story, because the most powerful moments are often the quietest ones.